Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here. I'm going to time myself because I'm concerned that I might take longer than you expect. So if I get really boring at some point, just like say something. I'm also very jet lagged. So if I start to speak in Spanish, please also just point it out. And I also got myself today a talking stick, which I love, so I'll be putting it here. And okay, so this talk, I've called it Public Space as a Collective Story, and for a collective story, trying to make the link to the festival, but also to try to explain what the approach of the firm is to public space and why it's important for us, public space. Let's skip the introduction about the firm because we've already had a really beautiful and long introduction to what we do, but the important thing is that we're committed to public realm. And to try to say it differently, I'm going to quote one of my own colleagues, Mark Lemansky, from a magazine called Urban Design, the edition of 2011 spring, in which he says, "The opposite of public is not private, but is used. Open spaces are not automatically public, and access needs nurturing. When we move out of our front door, we move into a space where we learn about the lives of others, where the unexpected can be encountered, a space to share. It is also a space that holds the lived histories of its citizens as much as the future will make out of it, and in that, it is a place where society constitutes itself." So I think it's a really good description that says why public space are really important for us, because they work as some sort of frame for our life, but they also are a mirror. So they can help us see who we are, why we're here, and try and kind of help us to find our place in all of this. Then I'm gonna tell you really briefly how we approach the design of public space. And then again, sorry to be moving back and forward, but to summarize on this and the relationship to design, I think a really simple way to say what the approach is to make meaningful spaces, or try to do, is to say it simply, to tell stories. So storytelling becomes really important, because that way you can use what is there to inform design, and you can use design to tell stories. So it's some sort of vicious circle, if you may. And these are the 4 tools that, upon reflection, we think we use a lot to approach public space. One is close looking. That means, of course, that you pay attention at the uses that exist already, and that allows you to nurture the uses that are there, or find the gaps and see what else could be done. It also means that you have to be there. And incredibly enough, we've seen lots of projects in which, by the time the project goes out to consultation, the architect or master planner or developer who's produced that hasn't been on site much. And so this is an important reminder that you really ought to know a place if we need to collect the stories that are in there and try to reflect them back. Another one is temporary intervention. This is really important because it allows you, or allows us, to advance the proposals in advance of advancing proposals. So that means architecture is a slow process. And so by doing or testing what you're proposing before, by taking the risk before, paradoxically you are minimizing the risk, because that allows you to really figure out if your proposal will work or if it's not going to work, and intervention can be very simple. Then the next one is participation. Apologies for just having a slide with only text. I'm going to try to illustrate the approach with 3 projects that follow after. So just keep them in your mind, and it'll refer back, I hope, with the examples. Participation. This is acknowledging that architecture is made of relationships, that any risk that is taken collectively. and that any success is done collectively as well. And especially that bringing people together actually creates unexpected and beautiful outcomes. And then the last one is considering architecture a process, an unfinished business. Just knowing that even when you finish a project, it'll still need nurturing. And if it's knowing as well that if you stay long enough to see what happens after, you will learn about the process and what you are designing. So, moving on to the interesting part, is trying to exemplify this approach through projects. I'm going to show 3 office projects and a personal project that try to use public space as a mirror and a frame, try to gather the stories that exist there, and to display them as a continuation of the story that's been collectively formed. The first one is called Making Space in Dalston. It's a project of 2009 that got extended last year. It's a project from which 76 mini projects were proposed and 10 got funding, and I'm gonna show you only one because we don't have much time. And we call that influencing someone else's master plan by making the alternative. So let's move on. So the stories, again, referring back to finding stories and reflecting stories, trying to design with the context that is found on site. So the context or the stories found on place are that Dalston is central London. It's a place that is changing very rapidly because there's been a master plan commissioned by the council. And it's one of those master plans where it might appear like the people drawing have not been on site that much because there are some discrepancies. For example, there's proposals in the master plan to create a shortcut to the shopping center, which sounds good enough. It happens to be proposed crossing a listed building, an historic building, so the demolition of a historic building to make way to get to the shopping center might not be the best alternative. There's other things in which, for example, there's paths that don't consider the change of level, so that they show a nice sort of explanation, I don't know if that word exists in English, of trees going and joining some housing, but they just haven't realized or they don't seem to acknowledge that the difference in levels might be 12 meters. So there's strange things going on in Dalston, but it's going so quick that there's like massive buildings out of scale appearing, like those buildings from the developer that started everything, Barrett's. And there's historic buildings that have been so neglected that the council has actually sold to a developer in Dubai, but the phone, and that has everyone infuriated. So that's one layer of the stories you can find on site. There's also obviously local activists really angry about what they perceive as erasing the character of the area, and this is one drawing made, commissioned by an artist, commissioned by them to an artist, in which they are showing what they believe is going to happen, which is this block of buildings with not much character, just sort of inviting you to buy things you don't need, fenced off, and just really looking all the same. And so the local activists have gone as far as getting into the council offices to try to talk to the mayor of Hackney, because this area is Hackney, and he's replied via the press things like, these people that are complaining, which are a few, are just trying to keep Hackney crap. So that's infuriated everyone. And on a quest to try to find value and to prove that there's lots of activity and cultural richness, we set out a mapping project under these principles to try to prove that actually it's a really rich, beautiful area that should be nurtured, and that value is not only found in speculation, but also in the use and the diversity of what's there. So these are the principles we set ourselves: value what is there, nurture the possible, and define what's missing. And I'm going to show you some of the maps or some of the experiments we did to try to collect this information. So we made first a blog of information that was called A Month in Dalston, which meant that we attended everything we could find, any cultural and taken really widely activity. Say, I don't know, it went from attending Halloween parade to getting our nails displayed in a contest. It went obviously from going to the theater to including charity shops and their events. And then that was mapped, that was pushed forward, creating a map of cultural activity in a radius of 10-minute walk. And that displayed the amount of designers, artists, and creative people in the area, and also the amount of public space, because, this area is really, really dense, the amount of public space ready to enable activity, perhaps not so well used. So we went to all the churches, community halls, the clown center, local library, and mapped all of those spaces in a map. And we also mapped all of the open green spaces. And that brought really interesting things like this map, which shows, this is a comparison with a tiny, medium-sized city park in London. And this is Dalston. So what this shows is that the little green, existing green space was actually located in between public housing. And actually this map allowed us to make the case further on to invest, to have central government invest in a local state as public realm. So that was really fascinating. And then another way of approaching the project that we did was whenever we did research, because this was 6 months of mapping, and proposals, we formed a stakeholder group, and we invited them. These are members from the community, cultural associations, from the Turkish Center, the local theater, the local cinema, and also the people involved from the sponsors and the council to come and meet us every month in a place on site to discuss what we had found and what we were proposing, what we were thinking of, to develop the scheme together. If at some point I make no sense, please someone tell me. Out of all this mapping, we then proposed 76 little projects that somehow contradicted the master plan. And we found a way, luckily, to make the case to find money for them. So out of these 76, 10 got funding, and I'm gonna show you how one worked. This is the Eastern Curve Garden. So this is Dalston. It's a very dense area. There's almost no green space. And we found this plot of land in the middle of, the thing on top is a massive shopping center of the tackiest kind. And then there is some beautiful old buildings enclosing it, and a gallery, and some half falling apart buildings on the other side. So basically it's an enclosed space. Half of it belongs to the council, half of it belongs to the shopping center, and it has remained inaccessible for decades. And because there is no green space around the area, we proposed as one of those projects that it becomes a community garden. And to test that idea, we were very lucky to be able to test it with someone else's money, because the Barbican Centre, which is a very important cultural institution in London, was looking for a site to bring a French collective that does public realm intervention. Is the guys, they're called Exist, and they wanted to make a mill in an urban setting, and we conveniently took them around the site, and they loved it. And so really quickly, planning, permissions, and everything went through. A door was opened through the hoarding that had had been keeping the place away from the public for so many years. And that door led you to the mill that you can see behind, and a wheat field that was imported that for 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, if I remember correctly, 5,000 people went through the door and saw the installation. You could make pizza there, have a beer, and just sit around, enjoy the space. So that helped us make the case to the client in Hackney and to the sponsor that it was actually a good idea, worth investing in making a community garden. People were eager to find a space to just relax. And once we got the money approved, that created the next layer of complexities, and this is how they got solved. So because half of the land belonged to the shopping center, which was aggressively pushing to build, well, basically to overdevelop the area around, we had to negotiate with them, we had to convince them that having a garden there would not be an impediment for them in the future to overdevelop the area. So we presented them with these kind of sketches in which we show that maybe at the present it's going to be a full garden, but maybe when they need to create a lovely fare through to their shopping center, there could be paths appearing, and maybe when they're ready to overdevelop the area, the trees can stay there and they will still keep the value that the garden brought to them, but still without sacrificing their lovely plants. And so that was step one, dealing with the sort of legal and convincing with the shopping center. Then another thing that happened is with public space, you need to constantly be negotiating what is happening. The uncertain is that the site had been closed for so long that people had been taking advantage, and by people I mean the neighbors, to throw lots of bin in there. So once we started the construction, we had to clear insane amount of rubbish. So there's that picture with the landscape designer in the middle of this pile of stuff. And this is the site after it's been cleared and the pavilion coming in place. It was built with exist, because they built everything from scratch with bare hands. They're builders, carpenters, designers. And also because they supported us in a proposal to have a group of youth from a youth center have a working experience with them. And this was because, if you remember those lovely towers at the beginning of the presentation of that developer, Barratt's, they had gotten their planning application approved, partly on the promise that when they started the building on site, they would train local people. And of course they never did. They just built their bloody towers and they never fulfilled that promise. So we tried to fulfill that promise. So we got like six or eight ex-offenders, and they worked with Nicholas and their crew to build the structure. Then yet another layer was maintenance. So it's very nice to propose a garden in the middle of the nowhere, negotiate the lease, but who's going to actually keep it? So because of the map, we knew what cultural associations or civil associations were nearby, and we went around talking to them, trying to find the right person that would take over maintenance once the exist left. And strangely enough, the people that are running it now and are running it really successfully are part of the group of people that were completely against the project at the beginning, the ones that had commissioned that lovely image of gentrification, and now they're running the garden. And this is because the process has been so long that they actually started to be on board, and now they're running it. So all this has allowed, like, the testing, defining the stories, trying to make sense of them, negotiating with all these parties, even with the council, dealing with all the problems that others left behind for us, dealing with problems on site. All this has led to having this empty site, unused for many, many years, becoming this garden that is won two prizes now for public space, and that is fully used, that holds lots of activities, and that is run by the very people who first opposed the project. Next, I hope that is helping to illustrate what we mean by close-looking, temporary intervention to test participation and unfinishedness. The next project is time. My timer. Oh, I forgot to press start. How long have I? Oh, well, you just let me know if it's too long. Brilliant, fine. So, but I haven't spoken in Spanish, so that's good. The next project is called High Street 2012. And the subtitle we put on it is Negotiating with a Complex Client Group as Means to Push Boundaries. And I'm going to explain this really quickly. This is because the client group was so big. So it was a mix of English heritage, Design for London, the local authority, Transfer for London, because in London the big streets belong to the Transport Authority. Whom else was in the group? The local stakeholders, and then on top of that you have to use the term contractors of the council. So it was a very complicated client group, but funnily enough, these turned out to be good because their rules and regulations for each are so strict that when we wanted to break them, we could just blame the other party, but don't quote me on that. So it'd be like, so we want to dig in this burial ground. You're like, no, you really cannot do that because it's in the rules. And you're like, yeah, but you have to remember that's actually part of Transfer for London's land, and they don't have that rule. And then you'd see like lots of emails going around, sort of everybody trying to convince each other, nobody being able to have a final word because it's a shared ground, and then possibilities being open. It was lovely. This, to give you a context of the narratives found on this site, this one is also quite complex. Also, Dalston is much more complex because it's so big. But this one, it's a strip of land that goes from the Olympic site to central London. The marathon was meant to run along it, and so the government was worried that it was not beautiful enough for the press and the cameras and the tourists to look at that land. So they decided to invest lots of money in 8 little projects, out of which we tendered for 4 and we got 3. And out of those 3, I'm going to show you one. But to give you more context, even though they decided to invest, say, in our 3 projects is £3.7 million. So imagine for the 8, it's maybe 3 times as much. Even though they decided to invest all that money, at the end they decided it was still not good enough, and the marathon didn't run through there, and it went to central London where the attractions were so obvious. And the good thing of that story is that we actually kept the money and we could do the public realm improvements nevertheless. And you will see at the end when I tell you the reflections, when I try to summarize what we've learned about our own approach to public realm, one of the things we've learned is that when the developer or when the local authority or the master planner has put a strap line on a project, you can really push it, and that's a way in which they cannot really take it back because it's already out there. For example, for the Olympic route, this route was advertised, and it's at the bottom. High Street 2012. It's an ambitious project to improve and celebrate one of London's great high streets. So it sounds really pretty, but at the end the marathon didn't run through there. So we really tried to push and celebrate and improve one of London's greatest high streets. And these are our 3 little projects. one is a very big park, one is a common, leftover land full of trees, and one is Altavali Park, which is the one I'm going to show you. And the layers of stories you can find there that we use to inform the design are quite complex. So it's a tiny, tiny pocket of green in the middle, again, of a very dense area, but it's also very important politically because the Bangladeshi immigrant group, which is the biggest in London, well, it's changing now, but here it's really, really big, even politically, kind of has taken over the park. And that also means there's not a lot of space for women and children, and we're trying to change that. It's also an important park because it gives the name to the whole area. Well, actually before. So Altavali, okay, let me explain all the layers and complications. The name this park now has, Altavali, is the name of a Bangladeshi student that was killed in a racist attack. So as a mean to make it good, the park's been named after him. But before that, let me find the slide. Okay, the whole area is called Whitechapel because this park used to hold the oldest chapel in the area. It's 1630s something church, and of which you could only see a proposed line by the previous architects with some concrete tiling on the floor that was actually not in the right location, but it doesn't matter. And it was obviously also a burial ground, so that's another layer of complication. You cannot really dig in because it's full of bones. And actually we had to negotiate, well, initially with the Church of England to be able to put up the sign that is not what's been there and approved. And at some point the local authority claimed rights over church land, and that led to lawyers being involved. So it gets really interesting. But it also contains, although the church is gone, a listed wall, this wall that surrounds the area, so it cannot be touched. It's a crime, basically. If something happens to that wall, you could end up in jail. What else is complicated? Well, there's the layer of the Bangladeshi. It's also represented in that monument you see at the end, the Shaheed Mina, which is a replica of a monument in Dhaka, which they use every year, the 21st of February, to commemorate the martyrs of their language movement. I'm not going to explain that, but it's important for them. And they use it a lot, and they do go every year, fill it with flowers at the middle of the night. Sometimes it's even snowing, and you just see them walk no matter what. And so as I was telling you, the park is kind of colonized at the moment we get to the sign by these young Bangladeshi guys. There's not there's not a big mix of people, although in the top you can see children. It's actually the same child, but because we were taking a panoramic and the kid was moving around, you get to see like lots of children there, but that was not intentional. But basically, even the play equipment is colonized by these gentlemen, as you can see. So we're trying to change that to be more inclusive. This is the end result. I'm going to explain it to you first, and then I'm going to go backwards to say how we uncovered layers and layers of meaning and try to include people to from early stages, help them understand what we were trying to do. So at the end, we've got a raised platform, bones, made out of green terrazzo that marks the actual location of the church, and some ruins that I'll show you where they came from. And the existing monuments remain where they are, obviously, because they're listed, but we just improved the setting around them. So you see, for example, the tomb at the corner, we just put a bench and a child bench, and we set a mat of stone around it so it had more presence. I wonder if you can see it before. Oh yeah, there she is, abandoned. Then we also created an improved setting for the Shaheed Mina and put some natural play in the hope that it'd be more vague, so more people would use it opposite to this. And coming back, okay. So one of the first things we did on site to try to convey the importance of these layers of sacred and secular was to work with the Museum of London Archaeology Department and do a dig. And during 10 days, with an open mesh fence, people could come in, obviously upon arrangement, and dig with the archaeologists and classify the objects. Groups and groups of kids from schools nearby came and helped. And they uncovered the actual location of the church walls. And then from the bits and pieces that were found, like there you can see like that stone bit round, or all these little pipe fragments, those were put back on site in the final design in that terrazzo plinth that perhaps you can see inside of this. I forgot the word in English. Related to church designed item. And then there was also, what's the word? Ecclesiastical, sorry. So with this ecclesiastical bit that is there to show the fragments of the excavation, and that is also there to show the reference to the actual church. And there's also this strata wall. So there's lots of specials that are designed when you uncover the layers of history. This strata wall was also designed with the students of architecture because the School of Architecture is really close by, and they work with concrete and color to design the wall that surrounds that hall. That actually, it was very controversial because, again, maintenance, the park, people thought it was going to be full of rubbish all the time. And they're kind of right, except for the fact that people respect it so much somehow that we've seen people clean it up, which is very, very sweet. And some of the bigger bits that came out of the dig, as that long bit you can see at the end, were put back on site. But also new pieces were produced, again to convey this ecclesiastical feel, and a new bit of floor for the same purpose. And these pieces were made with a local school of stonemasons, the Building Crafts College. And so there you start to see how these relationships are forming the design and informing the design. This is the original Shaheed Mina in Dhaka, and this is the one in the park. So we realized how important it was for them, because people actually go and do portraits in front of it, or when there's people visiting from Bangladesh to the Bangladeshi people even in London, they take them there and they make a picture. And on Language Day they also do, back in Dhaka, this street painting called Alpana. So as a celebration and way of trying to uncover layers and inform the design, we organized a local Alpana, and we worked with local artists and Bangladeshi students, and basically almost anyone could just walk in and paint. And although just the day before the festival started, because the festival is at 12 in the night, it rained. Part of it survived, and it was, there's a night picture there, and it was really appreciated by the community and just highlighted the importance of that monument. So in the final design, a piece of the pink terrazzo was set around it to try to relate to the traditional stone found in Bangladesh. Also the carving, you cannot really see it, but there's carving along the step. Everything was recladded, cleaned. There's lighting now for it, and the landscape got molded actually, so you can see it when you're coming from the other side of the park, because before there was this hill that would cover it. And also the trees around it were set to give it a framing. And this is the language day, just after the park was finished, with lots of observers using the church seating plinth and the stone items to look at the people parading, leaving flowers. And this is just any other day in which you can see how the disposition of the items spreads the use, and how maybe a little intervention like that piece of flooring relates to the story of what was there before. And this is after completion. This is a temporary project done by Catherine for the Venice Biennale of last year, in which she gathered together a speaker from all the associations around the park. Say, for example, the Anarchist Association, which is really close by, the Whitechapel Gallery, the mosque, and she gathered them in a series of lectures and a Karom tournament, which is a game the Bangladeshi play a lot. And then she filmed this and she sent it to Venice. And this is the installation in Venice, and in which you can see a picture of everything that's going on. And this is to nurture and promote understanding of what the layers of meaning mean. Ooh, that's very redundant. And trying to keep the uses going on. So it's like seeding. Like once you've done the design, this is like seeding the uses. Actually, well, maybe let's forget about that, actually. Next project. Sorry, because I have lots of anecdotes that relate to the projects, but maybe if we have time at the end, because I didn't put my timer, I have no idea how long it's taking. The last project is an unfinished project, Ruskin Square. It's been very controversial so far, and that's why I'm really happy to show it to you. Because, again, relating to this unfinished business, which means any built space, at least for us, is not the final line. It's just the continuation of the dialogue, of the story being written. And this one is called Subtitle: What Can Use inscribe as a design process to a corporate landscape? So, context and stories on site. So this is a piece of land that has been awaiting development for very long. It belongs now to a very big developer that has come and demolished everything. The site looks like this, like quite feral. It's surrounded by offices all around and the station. And the only building remaining is that little tiny theater, the black building, that is trying to survive, but it's about to go broke. And then for the vision or principles that we use to approach this project, I'm going to show you the vision of the architects and developers. So it's these lovely glass structures around a few trees, from this to this, yeah? And they kind of, by luck, I guess, very randomly named the project Ruskin Square. And I think that's because the mother of Ruskin lived on Croydon. But it was picked up really randomly because for them it really represented nothing. And then when the office started to work on this project, brilliantly, I think, my boss pushed the name and made it into principles. And from there, she got these Ruskinian, sorry about the spelling mistake, principles to develop the design, which is life is wealth and play and work. And so there's this quote from Ruskin, but at the end what she's trying to say is that public realm will be understood as a breakout space for all ages and an opportunity for revealing and augmenting the existing as found qualities of the site. Because opposite perhaps to the other two sites in which there's loads of layers of meaning, this one appears to be in a different condition in which the meaning has been wiped out, except for the theater already. So the vision is totally about seeding what's there and treating everything as if it's absolutely precious. And the vision is also to try to support the theater that's there. So the design aims to start with, and as an experiment, because we've only been commissioned to do temporary events to see the possibilities of the space. So the initial temporary design is to create a garden, like a beautiful feral garden with some cricket nets and basket courts, and try to use the concrete bits that are there and open a door through the theater. So people are forced to use the space by crossing the theater, so we support them, and they kind of operate as if they have this massive, beautiful backyard. It didn't work out exactly like that, but I'll tell you the story as I go on. So that's the vision. And so to convey that idea that everything in there is precious, there's a survey of everything, like piles of concrete, little plants. There is the testing of the ideas, because to promote the theater in the vision, forgot to mention, was using that black wall as a projection area and having a little stage or cinema outside. And also because this is the wall that is really evident from the station. So the station is on this side, and you can see it from the platforms, and when you pass in the train, that's all you see. So this is testing that idea and projecting a movie and bringing in some chairs and kind of try to convey something's going to happen, what are the possibilities. Then also working with the South London Botanical Institute, we brought people to survey all the species on site. And here you can see them laboriously taking notes, and in this other very bad picture you see the orange line is because they also suggested which bits ought to be treated like there's the most precious thing ever and protected and supported. Then also during construction decisions were made conveying the same thing, like it's precious. So when in between of the building process something was found, decisions were made to maybe change the paths. And that kept on telling the developer that the site had a lot to offer. Then as soon as it was finished, as soon as some paths were put in there, an area for putting chairs to project on the theater were there, the cricket nets and the basketball courts were there. It's about inviting people and seeding the uses. So we took the opportunity to link to a very important flower show in London, invited people to come, like leaflets were produced showing all the species of flowers, kids were drawing them. Then there's also an ongoing lunch club with cakes and tea, in which we invite or try to drag out of the offices the people working there to play cricket in their lunchtime. Then there's also, in Croydon, there's also an immigration, very big immigration branch of the Home Office, and the refugees, these are a group of Afghan refugees that are awaiting, they're waiting to see what happens with their immigration status. So in the meantime, they come and play cricket here. They have a cricket group. There's also been, after the intervention was finished, theater groups coming, performing. People can see them from the platforms of the train. It's been very misinterpreted, actually. Some people have said that the performance looked like they were activists taking over at the sign that they didn't like. And coming back to, because this is an unfinished project, coming back to where we are, I just want to read to you some lovely quotes from people commenting on The Observer, because The Observer had a review on the Ruskin project. And what they don't know is that although we really try to support the theatre, here you see a picture which says Sabor Theatre, and then on the other side, Ruskin Square would be a development that would change Croydon, which is obviously the developers' views. Pardon me. And so although we tried to support them, they actually went bankrupt. So the entry to the site now is through a hoarding that has a key, and the key is in the offices in front, so that puts off a lot of people, and it just hasn't worked as well as we would like. And so, for example, I have here some lovely feedback. So it's blah, 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 blah. Good luck to MOF with their intentions behind this. Great. So trying to say it's like only intentions. The subtlety of this intervention is indeed so remarkable that at a conservative estimate, 99.99% of the passing Croydon population have absolutely no notion as to what it is supposed to be about. People criticizing the photographs from the article are missing the point that a daylight shot, for instance, would have exposed the article to a scrutiny it would not sustain. Because architectural bullshit works best in the dark, where it keeps people. If MOF had had a proper vision, it should have been to support the theatre. Perhaps give them the space as a garden, cafe, terrace, projection space. So, well, yeah, I have trillions of them. And you can find them at the Observer article from the 28th of October 2012 on the Ruskin Square and MOF. So yeah, this is a project that is not finished. It's not going that great, but I feel confident because in all of the other projects we have moments like this actually, in which you think, uh-oh. But I trust it will actually influence the final result, and it will make it more beautiful and more interesting and less of this. And more of what it is at the moment, more of this. So for the future, here you can see that although the entry is not through the theatre, the paths come from there. They take you to these pockets of wild flowers. They open up to lead you to the half basketball yellow court. They take you to where the seats would be set for the projections in the theatre, and then the cricket nets. So the space is there, and although obviously for the developer in the future, the shape is not going to stay, we're expecting that the uses might stay. That maybe on the top of a rooftop there'll be like some space for sports activities, or that maybe the vegetation will not be so artificial, but might keep some of the fair landscape. And this is where we are at the moment. And as a last project, this is not an office project, I'm going to show you one of my personal projects again to relate storytelling to public space. This is called Fantastic Dalston. It relates to the project I showed you at the beginning. It's a fable to try to make sense of a place that's changing so fast. And it's a fable that's illustrated through performance on public spaces. Subtitle, a fable to understand a place. So I'm not going to read you the whole fable, but it's really simple. It just conveys that this place is going crazy. Things are happening that are out of control. Say a person tries to go to the theater and finds instead a massive block of flats. A person tries to go to church and maybe finds a betting shop. And then when the council thinks something's going wrong, they invest and they hire an external pair of eyes. And these people end up sort of certifying that actually the whole plot is empty. So to not make the story long, the wise men of the area make an invitation to the external eyes to actually engage with the place, and then at the end they realize that everything they thought was not there is actually there. And so, as I told you, this fable was illustrated to performances, and I chose 6 locations that really represented the change that was going on, like the really fast change, and how really meaningful icons for people were being wiped out. And I might not show you all of them because, yeah, I have my preferred ones. For example, this is the mural. You see the hoarding at the back is the one that leads you to the garden now. So this public space, again, kind of forgotten, not going anywhere, had this very beautiful mural, still has it, but at the moment it didn't belong to Hackney. It was privately owned. That represents what the whole area is about somehow. It's very mixed, it's very active. This piece mural was done in the 80s and was to convey that the area is like this area of people that care, basically. They're pacifists, they're creative, and to try to activate the sign as a symbol, if we may say it that way. I hired a tiny pop-up stage, and I invited people to perform the mural. So we did a live mural, and passerbys were invited to come. People that had been in the area for so long showed up, as well as the builders from the building in front, from Barrett. So it lasted like 2 hours, but it was really, really rewarding. I might not describe this one, neither this one. This one is another of the performances that are, really were meaningful to me to try to understand the change. This is the location, the Barrett's building actually, the developer that was doing those massive towers, is comfortably sitting on the location of the oldest standing, well, not now, circus in England. And the council just demolished it to make way for money. And so I took the owner of the theatre that had been running actually a very famous black club from the 60s in the area, back on the building side, so he could see what was left of his theatre. And he had this remaining sign, and he just went around till he found a location where we could reclaim back his space, and he set it there. And up to now, we remain really good friends, this man and me. And that also made Barrett, like this is the manager on site, this is the developer from the council, and in the middle that's the owner of the bar. That forced them to have a conversation, to be together, and for the press of the developers to be in touch with Newton. So it had a really nice outcome, and this is the third I'm going to share with you. It's at the very beginning I showed you a slide with the listed buildings. These were the terraces that had been bought by a developer in Dubai, kind of nameless, and he was proposing to demolish them all and make, again, a beautiful, gigantic tower. But the thing is, the terraces are listed, so English Heritage needs to protect them, and with pressure from the local activists, the terraces were bought back, obviously costing twice as much. But they are standing, they are awaiting part demolition to give way to some buildings, but the facade is going to stay, and the shop fronts are going to stay. And so this one of those shops, Sound and Music, belongs to a person that had been there 35 years, and who was one of the only ones in a row of 15 terraces that had refused to leave. The rest were bought or decided to just not fight the council. So to celebrate his existence there and his perseverance, I organized a concert of 35 minutes on the pavement with volunteers, with musicians. And as a retribution, he gave me back a guitar, actually. This is the market. So I skipped 3 of those, and I just jumped to the end. At the end, a physical book was actually made, narrating how crazy the city was and how action reshapes the city, and it was donated to the local libraries. and it had empty pages at the end to convey that obviously everybody, every day is shaping the meaning in the public space. Which leads me to lessons learned. So again, referring back to when I was saying that for us, public spaces are unfinished businesses because they allow us to stay there and see what happens and to learn and share and nurture after it's finished. These are some of the most important lessons we've learned by holding this approach of trying to uncover stories so that we can shape the design with the stories and as well use the design to tell more stories. It's like writing a line in the middle of a book. And so I'm going to read them. One is what I explained about Ruskin Square: hold the brief, a strap line, a marketing strategy, a legend on a plan to its promises. Like it's going to be a brilliant space, like shared by lots of people. Well, make it be. Then build projects that have principles, which is why I told you that at the beginning of Dalston we had value what's there, nurture the possible, define what's missing, or in Ruskin Square trying to seed from what is missing. And in Altavali, actually didn't mention it, but it was threading lightly, which is because all these delicate parts had to be dealt with lots of care. Another thing we've learned is to push projects beyond all expectations of contract documentation, because generally the projects, when we are commissioned, they say something like, design a park. And that's all they would actually ask for in return. But if you just push that a little, then the space begins to make sense, we hope collectively. Then another thing that's important for us is make instead of represent, and include others in the process. And again, this is testing. The testing doesn't always go right, but it's really helpful to see when you are imposing something more than nurturing something. And sometimes it's really helped with really simple interventions to prove that we are totally wrong. And I would have loads of anecdotes there, but let's go to the next one. Measure the value of a temporary occupation in all directions. This is because it does really go beyond just knowing where it is working or not. People get involved in the process. Conversations that couldn't have happened or would have happened in a really tense environment happen. And sometimes the most unexpected group takes over management of a piece of land. Then recognize that if the process is successful, it's because everybody's implicated. And it's true, like architecture is relationships, and we must recognize it. And then be in the room long enough to make a contribution. This is also very true, because at the beginning working with public spaces, generally when you come and speak to the local community, they're really angry. They're really, really angry, and sometimes it feels like you're given hours of free psychotherapy before actually the conversation starts to take off. So this is very important. I've just realized I haven't been looking at you in all this conference, I'm sorry. And then the last one is taste to see what happens. If you just finish a project and leave, you learn like nothing or not as much as you could have if you actually stay to see what fails. Like it can be really simple things like toilet doesn't flush, but it can be really important things like you totally misdesigned a bit. And I think I presume I'm perfectly on time because I really don't know when it started. But just to finish, I'm gonna tell you two very inspirational quotes that I kind of got out of the blue because I'm also studying psychotherapy. And I think they relate perfectly well to this trying to convey that telling stories is important and participation is important. And using public space, using what you're passionate about to try to do these two things is very important. So here we go. Is Jung. So he says, the reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories. Ain't that brilliant? Conveniently brilliant. And then he also says, it all depends on how we look at things and not on how things are in themselves. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. And just to finish, I want to tell you that is the potential for create a collective meaning that makes us care so much about public space. And although we really don't claim to know or approach is the best, we are really aiming to create public spaces that inspire and empower us, or at least write the first or the middle, for that instance, line of a story that is being collectively written. Thank you very much.